260 miners trapped in a South African gold mine have been rescued after more than 24 hours. Countries across Africa are seeing a rise in mine-related accidents, exploitation and environmental damage. So what lessons are being learned from past tragedies? And are Africans getting a raw deal? This is Inside Story. Hello, welcome to the programme. I'm Tom McRae. More than 260 miners have been brought to the surface in South Africa after being stuck underground at a gold mine for 24 hours. This time, there were no fatalities or injuries. Africa is at the centre of a rising demand for minerals and precious metals. Lithium is essential to the transition away from fossil fuels used for batteries in electric vehicles and other clean energy technologies. But in Democratic Republic of Congo, rights groups continue to denounce the dangerous working conditions of children in artisanal mines, particularly for cobalt. So are the continent's critical minerals at a critical juncture? And what will be the impact of the global scramble for Africa's natural resources? And we'll put those questions to our guests in just a moment. But first, this report from Hamza Mohammed.
Families looking for their loved ones who have been missing since Thursday after an accident at a gold mine near Johannesburg. The mine's operator says the 260 miners are safe and have been rescued.
I haven't slept. The management of this mine, anyone inside better bring back my husband alive. That's all I have to say. I want him alive.
Mining accidents are not uncommon in South Africa. Many abandoned shafts have been taken over to serve as illegal mines. In January, at least 78 bodies were recovered from an illegal mine. Police had cut off food and water for months in a bid to force the workers to come out. Last year alone, South Africa lost more than $3 billion to illegal gold trade. And it's not just South Africa. Across Africa, illegal mining is booming, driven by increasing global demand for gold and other rare minerals. In Democratic Republic of Congo, officials say hundreds of foreign companies are operating without permits, extracting resources without declaring their profits. Dozens of armed groups have also taken over several mines in the east, where there has been decades of conflict. Much of the world's cobalt, essential for batteries in electric cars and smartphones, come from mines like this one in DRC. The Congolese government says it loses around $1 billion a year to illegal mining. But the miners themselves often earn just a few dollars a day, working in dangerous conditions.
I've been digging for 7 years. I get $40 a month, but that's not enough. Children need clothes, education and food. When I divide up the money to see how I will take care of my children, I realize it's not enough.
According to the charity Swiss Aid, 435 tons of gold, worth more than $30 billion, was smuggled out of Africa in 2022. In Ghana, illegal mining has polluted rivers, destroyed forests, and wiped out farmlands. Last year, thousands marched in protest demanding tougher action. As global demand for Africa's minerals continue to rise, there is a renewed push from governments to learn from past mistakes and to ensure the wealth beneath the ground lifts the lives above it. Hamza Mohammed, Al Jazeera for Inside Story.
Okay, let's bring in our guest now. In Johannesburg is Claude Kabemba, who is the Executive Director of the Southern Africa Resource Watch. In London, Christopher Vandome, a Senior Research Fellow at the Chatham House Africa Programme. And in Washington, D.C., Maurice Carney, Co-founder and Executive Director of Friends of the Congo. Thank you so much for being with us here on Inside Story today. Claude, if I can begin with you. I mean, obviously, mining, no matter where it is in the world, is an inherently dangerous business, but it seems like there is a disproportionate number of incidents and accidents in Africa. We see this time and time again. Why is that?
There is no dispute that the Africa mining industry has immense potential due to the continent's vast reserves of minerals. But Africa mining industry faces complex and interlinked challenges. And for me, the first challenge and most important one is the nature of the state in Africa. Most of African states are quite dysfunctional. Even those who are functional, their institutions are not well built to manage the complexity of the mining industry. And that is reflected in the documentary just shown, where countries are unable to manage the increasing, evolving artisanal mining, where we are seeing a lot of human rights violations and people who are working in very unsafe conditions, and most states have been unable to manage that. But even in the industrial mining, we have seen a number of illicit financial flows, tax evasions, mining companies unable to enforce regulations. And for me, that is the problem of the state in Africa that needs to be faced. But secondly, is the problem of the integration of the mining sector in the world economy. I think we still remain in the colonial model where Africa extracts raw material that is export outside and in return get a bit of tax. That tax is not enough to build the economies of these countries. We've seen increased unemployment. The artisanal mining is a reflection of economic problems in Africa. Normally, nobody should allow people to work in those conditions. If they are working in those conditions, it's more about African conditions not being good enough to create jobs, and mining sector, which would have contributed to that, has been in very difficult conditions.
Well, if we can talk a little bit about those conditions, Maurice, I'd like to bring you in here. First of all, can you just explain the difference between illegal mining, artisanal mining, and the larger scale industrial mining that we see, and the, I guess, the issues that come with all three of those?
Sure. In the Congo, if you, for example, you look at the old Katanga province in the south, you have a mix of what you call industrial mining, that's mechanized mining, and artisanal and small-scale mining that takes place side by side. And often they clash. You have artisanal small-scale miners who feel that they're not getting the prime concession, let's say, that's given to the industrial mining. So you have a clash between where you have the artisanal miners go on to the industrial mining concessions in order to access and dig for the copper and the cobalt. And it's not unusual for the industrial mining companies to call in security forces to clear off the artisanal and small-scale miners. So that's one question around security. And this is in the south of the Congo. If you look to the east, for example, where you have a multitude of militia groups and you have aggressive neighbors like Rwanda and Uganda, they go in and they capture mining areas. The latest conflict in the east of the Congo, we see the Rwandan soldiers and their M23 militia capturing a major coltan mine area called Rubaya, the largest coltan mine in the east, in Africa, really. And you see there questions of violence, questions of displacement, questions of issues of rape and sexual violence against women, all in an attempt to capture mineral-rich area in the east of the Congo. Just overall, in terms of whether you're talking about artisanal mining or industrial mining, there's devastation on the environment. You take the industrial mining, for example, where you have major mining companies, whether it's China Molybdenum, Glencore, in the old Katanga province, and they're digging up of these toxic minerals. Dust gets in the air and pollutes the water, has an impact on the vegetation, has an impact on the population overall in terms of health concerns. You find increase in asthma or increase in malformed birth from women. The AfriWatch, a local NGO in the Congo, and RAID, Rights and Accountability and Development, produced a report this past year that demonstrates the devastation that industrial mining is having on the local population, whether it's regard to health, whether it's regard to security, whether it's regard to the environment. So you have a situation where whether it's artisanal mining, industrial mining, in the Congo is rich with these critical minerals that are vital for the green energy transition. The population suffers tremendously as a result of the pursuit of these critical minerals.
And like you say, not just in the short term, but in the long term with health defects as well. Chris, if I can bring you in here, I mean, this has all been an issue for decades, I mean, if not longer, if not for generation after generation. We heard a little bit before about Claude saying partly it's because of the state of dysfunction in Africa as well as the colonial model. Why do you think, what are the underlying issues here that mean that it hasn't been able to get sorted?
Big question. Look, I think that Claude's point is valid. You know, we're dealing with a mining sector, or an industrial mining sector, that was inherited after colonial rule, and much of the business model stays the same. There was a period of nationalization through the 1960s and 70s where newly independent states and newly independent governments nationalized a lot of the colonial and private mining companies. And then this was followed by a period of privatization in the 1990s and early 2000s, where due to low commodity prices, due to high social expectations of what those mines would generate, you ended up with the mines being passed back into private hands, but with very high expectations of what those private companies would be delivering. So we're in a weird position at the moment where countries began a privatization journey, but it was going hand in hand, privatization and the regulation that would govern that industry. And so there are big gaps in terms of how the industry is governed. Some of that has been filled by voluntary initiatives and other, we call them soft law governance initiatives. And these are doing a really good job at helping fill some of those gaps. But it is a bit, the regulations catching up with the industry, which is catching up with the regulation, and all at the same time, as you pointed out, that there's now, it's not just critical minerals where the demand is radically increasing. As we've seen from the videos here, it's gold also, and gold isn't on a critical minerals list necessarily, but its price is skyrocketing. So there's different sectors that have different concerns. But at the moment, it seems that there's a lot of demand for many things, and that's really putting pressure on governments to be able to adequately enforce the regulation that is in place, both over the industrial mining sector and over artisanal mines. And a further challenge I think has been alluded to already is the fact that in South Africa, as was shown in your video, artisanal mining is largely outlawed, and so you have a lot of illegal mining. It's called zamas, and that was the case with those that got stuck earlier in the year, or in Stilfontein, and you can see the pace and the speed at which the crisis this week has been averted, where you have got a private operator who's able to put in place a rescue plan that can bring people up very quickly and effectively. Elsewhere on the continent, particularly DRC, artisanal mining is legal, and much of what is happening in the eastern part of the country, we've got tin, tantalum, tungsten, and gold. Much of that is being done by artisanal mines. So again, coming full circle back to this question of how do governments respond, in some countries it's much easier where they've got one or two commodities primarily industrially mined. But somewhere like the DRC, you've got an industrial mining complex along the south of the country, particularly around cobalt and copper. And speaking to people in the Cobalt Institute and other kind of cobalt research institutes, they're actually pointing to the fact that artisanal cobalt mining is on the decline. But then you've also got the east of the country where you've got these tin, tantalum, tungsten, they call them 3TG, with gold as well, which is primarily artisanal. and requires a completely different set of regulatory procedures, different level of state enforcement. And one of the things that we've been working on is helping companies and helping artisanal miners with that traceability. How do you know that what comes from one place before it gets into a smartphone? How are you able to look at your smartphone and say, okay, this came from that specific location?
Okay.
And for us, we see that as a big part of the solution. Let's get better knowledge about where these materials that we in other countries are using, let's know where they're from, and then we can have a better response to making sure that they're responsibly sourced and overcome some of these challenges that we've seen in the past around resource curse and so on.
Okay, Claude, if I can go back to you and just talk us through the difficulties around the regulation that's already in place, the enforcement and how difficult it is to do that, and just the lack of political will to trying to overcome the state of dysfunction as you explained it earlier.
I think we'll take the case of the Democratic Republic of Congo because my colleagues have focused on that. When you look at the Congo currently, and since the Mobutu regime and the successive regimes, there's not been a willingness to invest in governance of the mineral sector, because the investment in the mineral sector, creating a more robust governance system, will cut off the capacity of the elite who have captured the sector to continue to gain from the sector. So sometimes the willingness to invest is for the elite to remain in control of the sector. As you know, the level of corruption in the sector is such that between the elite and the major companies, even in the sense of paying taxes, sometimes the tax is not paid straight into state coffers, but goes in people's pocket. You look at the artisanal mining is captured by the elite, but also by the military. So there is an unwillingness to really reorganize the mining sector to maintain elite control. But one of the biggest problems is the fact that communities are simply excluded from the decisions on how to manage this sector, especially the principle of free, prior, and informed consent is not enforced. And we think that that is an important solution to some of these problems, to empower community to hold private sector and government to account. Another big problem is just the tax regimes. As I think the administration of taxation is so weak in the Congo and other African government that they are unable to collect taxes. Yeah. There is no way that mining will be an important sector and you fail to invest significantly in terms of human resources, logistics, and infrastructure. More importantly, again, is the lack of infrastructure. Really, you look around the Congo, there isn't good roads, no railways, nothing that can support mining to flourish and to contribute significantly to the economy. And that is deliberate, I think.
Sorry, Maurice, just sticking with the cobalt and the DRC, you recently worked on a film that focused exactly on this issue in particular. I mean, can you just explain the realities of what it is like for not just the people that work on the mines, but the communities that surround them as well, and how they are impacted?
Yeah, we were friends of the Congo with a local coalition called the Basanja Coalition, with the diggers this past summer, the cobalt and copper diggers in the Lualaba province and Kolwezi in particular. And in the film there you see it's a semi-industrial mine, that is to say that the collective of cooperatives gathered in order to work with companies that would dig up areas where there's cobalt-rich and copper-rich areas, so that the diggers wouldn't have to dig tunnels. They'd actually, as you can see in the film, walk down into the mines and able to dig and load the minerals into bags, and then trucks take them out. So you have a situation where you have cooperatives that are well organized, collectives, to tens of thousands of diggers that enforce standards such as no children in the mines, no women who are pregnant in the mines. If there are any issues in terms of, while we were filming, there was a tractor on top of the mines. We were about 100 feet down, and they were digging up top, and then rocks started to come down. So the foreman blew the whistle, and everybody filed out of the mines and went to the top. So that you have local communities made up of cooperatives that are taking control in the absence of, what they say is the former state company.
Right. Claude, if you can talk a little bit about the environmental impacts that digging up these minerals supposedly used in trying to turn the rest of the world green, but they're doing tremendous damage to these communities, to the environment where they're actually dug up, aren't they?
Definitely. I think with the rush, we've seen an increase in extraction of these critical minerals, your cobalt, your lithium, your graphite, manganese and nickel. In the Congo, cobalt, copper, which have been extracted for centuries now, we've seen an increase. Congo has just produced last year 2.4 million tons of copper, 198,000 ton of cobalt. That's quite a lot, a significant increase. And the impact on water pollution, on deforestation, on air pollution, on land pollution is extremely deep, that increasingly communities don't have water, clean water for their livelihood. Communities don't have access to Arab land. They have to travel kilometers and kilometers to find a way to farm and to get some crops to feed themselves. So we are experiencing a energy transition, which is in fact not just, despite us calling it just energy transition. If
Indeed.
the energy transition is going to be just, we need to place community at the center of the discussion. Labor issues, significant, badly paid, most of the workers working in extracting these critical minerals, but also working in very difficult and unsafe conditions. So I think the world will have to replace the issue of communities and labor at the center of the energy transition.
Yeah, and just on that, obviously, we've talked a lot about the issues that the industry faces in Africa. But Maurice, is there, sorry, I'll go to Christopher, if I could, for this question. Is there a duty of care from these international companies, these other countries that are, I guess, benefiting from mining in Africa? Is there a duty of care to make sure they're doing better? And so we're not seeing these accidents, this environmental fallout? And is there any willingness on their part to do so?
Yeah, look, I think that there is a legal responsibility. There's also an operational responsibility, and there's a moral responsibility. In terms of the legal responsibility, if you are, for example, using 3TG in your supply chains, you have to, and you're an American company, you have to report that what you're using is DRC conflict-free. So there are legal regulations around what you need to report around your sourcing. Similar in the European Union and in the UK, reporting requirements for conflict-free minerals and adherence to international standards around responsible sourcing. In terms of an operational responsibility, look, companies do need to have a social license to operate. They need to have the community buy-in. And I'm talking about the industrial-sized companies now. The industrial companies need to have that community buy-in. Yes, there is a really long legacy and history of poor community relations or labor relations within the industry, but there's also some really good practice out there. There are mines that are being put in places where there's been very limited industrial economic activity in the past, where people now have good jobs, adhering to the best health and safety regulations, and there are being put in place the as best as possible mechanisms for equitable benefit sharing. And the companies need to have the communities on side. So we are getting to a point, and there's been a lot made about the point around Congo in this discussion. The copper mark, which is an international standard for copper. There are 3 now verified copper mark mines on the whole of Africa, and they're all in the DRC. So standards are improving, and those are 3 of the biggest mines that contribute for a significant proportion of that country's output. So there is space to learn.
Yes,
but we are at a place where it's not all doom and gloom. There are some good stories out.
Maurice, we've got less than a minute in this program. If I can come to you for the final word, who needs to drive that positive change? Where does that need to come from?
It needs to come from several levels. I think the path toward resource sovereignty, ultimately for Africa, is a path that's going to deliver the kind of results that we look for in local communities: good health, good education, value staying locally in order to build infrastructure. So I think that would be the path that African leaders ought to be looking toward, not just individual countries, but as a Pan-African undertaking, because you need the manganese, you need the nickel, you need the copper, and no one country has all of that. So there needs to be a Pan-African Union in order for Africa to play their rightful role in this energy transition that we're witnessing.
We'll have to leave it there, but thank you so much, Claude, Christopher and Maurice. We really do appreciate your time and your insight here on Inside Story. Well, thank you too for watching. You can see the program again anytime by visiting our website. That's aljazeera.com. For further discussion, go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can also join the conversation on X. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. For me, Tom McRae, and the entire team here, bye for now.
Make sure to subscribe to our channel to get the latest news from Al Jazeera.